Hi, hi, hi. Today we're talking about plotting stories and the report writing structure. So, if you've ever wondered, okay, what exactly a report is supposed to look like, you're just getting started. If you're wondering, okay, what does the story structure actually look like, then today is the day. You don't want to miss this session because we'll be going through the 5 paragraph report structure and I'll be showing you what the plot is so that we can really get into understanding stories. All right, so stick around, stay tuned, and here we go. Hi, hi. You know what? I just realized that I played the wrong intro, but that's okay. I'll play it on the way out so that you'd see today's session is not actually April 24th, it is May 2nd, and we're dealing with the report structure and the plot for stories. All right. So thank you for tuning in. One of these days I'll get the hang of this tech stuff, ever so often when we're adding new things, it doesn't always quite work out. But okay, so we're here and we're dealing with report structure and the plot. Now, I wanted to share something with you actually before we get into that. Um, a lot of what I'm talking about and what I refer to, especially when it comes to reports and narrative, like the little details, there are many questions surrounding these two things with creative writing. I get my information as far as possible directly from the Ministry of Education because I know there's lots of information out there, some of it accurate, some of it not accurate, and I really want to make sure that what I'm giving you is, as best as possible, the right information so that you and your child or your students can be as successful as possible. So I wanted to show you where I get the documents from so that you can go and get the documents from there. I do download them, and in SEA, the Peace-Filled Approach, there is the documents are there. So if you want to go to our file section in that Facebook group, you can access them there. But many of the documents, like I said, they were taken from the Ministry of Education, and you can actually get them on the Ministry of Education website along with a host of other resources. So I thought before we get into our discussion, it would be useful to show you how to access those things. So let's go to the Ministry of Education website, and let me just share screen. Right, so you should be seeing the Ministry of Education website. Nice. And this is just, www.moe.gov.tt. And when you get to the website and you get this information, you'd have the tabs on the top. There are two ways you can access it. You can go to resources, and when you click on resources, you would need to scroll down and you see we have curriculum resources, ECCE, guidelines, health and safety, occupational policy documents, primary school resources. You click on that, and then you come to this page and you would see a list of all the resources that are available. And as you can see, there are quite a few. So, for report writing, I base a lot of the information that I share with you on this one here, which is the report writing for SEA, FAQs, that's frequently asked questions. And then we have 2019 writing exemplars, we have specimen papers, we have the revised framework, which has been extended to 2024. So those of you writing 2024, this is the framework that you're using as well. Um, and then some other information here. So we have recommendations, strategies, I know someone in the SEA Peacefield group had asked about penmanship. There's some information on penmanship here on the ministry's website as well. So it is worth checking through the ministry's website to see what information you can access. But just know that what I'm sharing with you regarding the specific details about report writing, I'm sharing a lot from that document here. This is the writing exemplars and the frequently asked questions for reports in particular. All right. Now, the other way, of course, you can access it if you when you come to the home page, then you can just scroll down to see summary. You can click on that, and when you click on that page with the list of general information and specifically SEA resources here. So I really wanted to share that with you because I think, as we are working on developing ideas, developing writing skills, and as you're working toward SEA 2024, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming because you're hearing lots of different things. My advice to you is to double check everything as far as you can with what the Ministry of Education has released in terms of their documents and so on, because you really want to be guided in the clearest way possible, so that verify your information. So yes, speak with teachers, speak with other parents, join groups and so on, but be also mindful that you want to double check and verify everything you hear. So even the stuff that I'm sharing with you, feel free to double check, verify, to make sure that what you're working on is what you should be working on, and your goal is going to get you the grade and the marks that you're looking for when it comes to SE. All right. So I really thought I should, share that with you before we get started. And now let us get started. I actually a slide presentation today so that you could follow along, because I recognize that the plot structure and the report structure, these are like foundation concepts. So far what we've done is to discuss you know what the requirements are. We went through the rubrics. We looked at what a narrative is, what a report is, what the differences are between the two. And now we're looking at the structure of the different documents. Now, I always start with the structure because, like I said, I believe in giving the details before any kind of writing really begins. And understanding how to order the information is really going to help students when they start putting their ideas together. So when the ideas come, the fastest way to really get it on paper is if you have a structure, if you have a format, if you are organized. So understanding plot and understanding the report structure is going to help with that. So let's get into that. And yes, today is the second of May. So we're working with report structure and the plotting of stories. Now, of course, I'm starting with reports again because, like I said, reports tend to go through their the information is quite detailed, structured, precise, and concise. Narratives, we have a little bit more flexibility. So is going to take a bit of discussion. So let's get started with the reports. And thank you for those of you who are able to join the live. I really appreciate it. And please send me comments, send me messages. Let me know that what I'm sharing is useful to you, because, sometimes I'm speaking to the camera. I'm here alone in the office today and I'm sharing the information. And even though I know what I'm sharing is useful, I want to know that how I am sharing it is accessible and that you can use the information. All right. I'm sharing as much as I can during the hour. I'm not really holding too much back. Um, but of course, if you need more details, because it's only an hour to share both, you can message me and I'll let you know what resources I have available that you can access. Okay. And of course, if you're not yet a member, definitely join SEA, the Peace Filled Approach, because we share posts every day about the different aspects of development for SEA, not just creative writing. Today is Creative Writing Tuesday. That's when I do the live. But on Mondays, we talk about math, Sundays, spelling, and the I think what we do spelling, punctuation, capitalization. Wednesdays, comprehension. Thursday, we look at math again, specifically worded problems. Friday, we deal with grammar. And on Saturday, we take a break and rest and reflect because breaks are important, right? But so join the group if you're not already a member, and please access the resources and let us know what it is you're looking for, what do you need, so that we can support you on this journey to SCA as best as we can. All right, so on to our presentation for today, or discussion. So here's the thing with reports, right? I get this question all the time, all the time. How long should a report be? And I hear students telling me that, okay, their teacher says they must have 5 sentences or 5 lines per paragraph and so on. So I want to get this out of the way. And again, remember, I referenced that frequently asked question document issued by the ministry that you can get off the ministry website or in SEA, the Peaceful Approach group, because I downloaded it and I put a copy there. Um, the thing is, that's like the first thing that they dealt with. There's no word limit or specified length. So you don't have to have any, um, 5 sentences, 5 lines, five anything. But the only guideline that was given, and this was given in the exemplars and reinforced in that frequently asked questions booklet, students have to write more than 1 paragraph. So it doesn't even say write 3 paragraphs or 5. Now, I teach a 5 paragraph structure, which we'll get into in a minute, but that is my recommendation because what I have found is that helps students understand the different sections and the kind of information they need to include. So to me, it's the most efficient and the most effective. But that is my recommendation. And from time to time, I'm going to be making it quite clear what is my recommendation and what was issued or recommended by the Ministry of Education so that you could, make a distinction between the two. And of course, I'm going to explain if I agree or disagree and, with the other recommendations that I hear, as well as I'm going to give the rationale and the reasoning for what I do. All right, so we're going through that, but remember, there's no word limit, no specified length. The only guideline, more than 1 paragraph, so even 2 paragraphs could work. However, there needs to be clear introduction, body, conclusion. So by that reasoning, I would say, notice the distinction, I would say 1 paragraph each, 1 paragraph introduction, 1 paragraph body, 1 paragraph conclusion, and that gives you a very simple 3 paragraph structure. Now, where I get the 5 paragraph structure from is that I break the body into 3 paragraphs. So you can write everything in the body in 1 paragraph if the student you're working with is a slow writer or they have difficulty with expanding on ideas. But what I usually tell students is start with that 5 paragraphs, make sure you get the pieces clear, and then you could merge, paragraphs 2 and 3 could merge, and paragraph 3 and um, paragraph 4 and 5 could merge, so you end up with the 3. So, however, you want to break it down afterward, but make sure they get the 5 sections of the report so that they can have all the details that are necessary. All right. And this was taken directly from that frequently asked questions booklet. and it was referencing the 2019 exemplars. It is not advisable to have a word or sentence limit per paragraph because that tends to, kind of box students in. So students ask me all the time, and I've heard, teachers say have 5 or 6 or however long, and I understand that the reason for that is to really give students some structure to work with, because there are students whose minds think like that. How many sentences do I have to write in this paragraph? You tell me 5 paragraphs, but what? 3 sentences in a paragraph, 5 in a paragraph. And once they get those guidelines, they seem to work better. But I would give them the range as well so that if it comes to it, they don't feel pressured. They can write what they need to write within 3 sentences or 4 or 5. So it really is a very what's the word? I think tenuous is the word. Situation, is one of those tricky situations. You want to give guidelines, but don't be so absolutely strict with the guidelines that students are boxed in and, limited in the way they respond. So that's in terms of the reports. When we get to narratives, I'm going to give a general overview of that one as well. But let's get into the report structure now. So we're looking at, like I said, I teach a 5 paragraph structure. And this 5 paragraph structure identifies the different sections of the report that students should have in their responses when they're responding to reports. Now, the first paragraph is an introduction or a summary. And this is where the students answer, who, what, where, and when. They don't answer how, they don't answer any other questions, and they really should be quite specific with these details. And it's really a summary of who was involved, what is the situation, where did it happen, and when did it happen. Those are the questions that you answer. Now, I also teach a very specific structure and format for answering this, for the different types of reports that many students have found quite useful, and it assists with flow of the paragraph and so on. But this particular paragraph, usually students would write like maybe 2 to 3 sentences, sometimes 4, depending on what kind of situation they're dealing with. But generally, I recommend 3 sentences for this one, and that's my recommendation simply because of how the information can flow. Because remember, as we discussed before, reports are meant to be formal. So, in order to build that formal tone right from the introduction, I recommend 3 sentences. All right. And like I said, it's a summary answering who, what, where, when. The next paragraph is what happened before. Now we're looking at a situation. Remember, we have the 5 types of reports plus the natural disaster type, right? So depending on the situation you're working with, you're going to start talking about now how did everything begin. We identified in the introduction who was involved, where the thing happened, when it happened, and what actually happened. So now, after we've had that summary, now we're getting into, okay, how did this whole thing start? And that's where you would identify, where everybody was, what they were doing before the thing happened, and, give an idea of the events leading up to the situation itself. Paragraph 3 then is going to be the situation itself. And you want to give that step by step development of the situation itself. So you don't want to just say, okay, this happened. How did it happen? How did it happen? Um, and I chose this graphic because, this is a kind of step by step building on itself. And that's important when you're describing what happened during the situation, because you don't want to just have one general concept. So, okay, if you, let's say it's a bullying report, that would be an incident report. It's not enough to say, I observed um, Richard bullying Harry. It's not enough just to say that. What exactly did Richard do? How did Harry respond? What exactly in detail did you observe? And for the remaining paragraphs, like paragraph 2 and 3, remember I said in paragraph 1, average 3 sentences. Paragraph 2 and 3 could be anywhere from 3 to 5, I would say. And again, some students might write more depending on how fast they write and what can be accomplished within the time for each particular student. So you really would need to monitor as we get to practicing how the student would write, and then that would determine how many sentences and so on that they're comfortable with while giving the relevant information. All right, so during the situation, step by step, you know, Richard um, pulled on Harry's collar, he pushed him to the ground, then he kicked him. Yes, Richard is a naughty boy, but it's a bullying situation. So we want some details, right? Um, then paragraph 4 is where I recommend putting what happens immediately after. Now, the difference between paragraph 3 and 4 is that in paragraph 3, we're talking about what is happening during the situation itself. Now, in paragraph 4, we're getting into responses. Now, here is where we might get teachers being contacted, the results, let's say it's a competition. This is where the competition would end. This is where in an activity, things would be completed and that type of thing. What is the immediate reaction after the situation itself? All right. And then we have paragraph 5, which deals with the consequences and outcomes. Now, consequences would apply to mainly incident reports, sometimes accident reports. Outcomes would apply to the activities, competitions, and events. Because, of course, when we think about consequences, we're thinking about, okay, what's the fallout? Any kind of punishment, any kind of changes being made as a result of this thing happening. And we generally think of consequences as, the not so pleasant type of responses after the whole thing has played off, right? And the difference between that immediate reaction and the consequences and outcomes has to do with the longevity of the response. And when I say that, this is what I mean. An immediate response would be somebody going to call the teacher comes and breaks up the fight, takes people to the principal's office. If anybody was injured, they would attend to the injuries, call the nurse, that type of thing. If it's competition, all right, goals were scored, points were allocated, accumulated, and then we end things off, and we close off with these results kind of thing. Outcomes at this point and consequences we're looking at for like competitions and so on. Outcomes would be, all right, prize giving, vote of thanks, where we're closing off the event itself, not the actual situation that was reported on. So those are kind of like the differences between paragraph 4 and 5. When you're writing a complete report, you want to include both immediate responses and those outcomes and consequences. So this is the 5 paragraph report, and like I said, I recommend this 5 paragraph report because we're looking at the different sections and helping students actually see the separation in things, in the event, in the situation, so that they can begin to think more critically and identify the details, how things came into being. Now, remember, they're not meant to give any judgment on this, but they are meant to report what they saw, what they heard, what they observed, or what they participated in, what happened during that, the whole thing. So, the way I look at it is that the introduction is kind of like, this is what I'm going to tell you about. And the outcomes and consequences, this is what happened as a result of what I told you about. And then the paragraphs 2, 3, and 4, this is the telling of the thing, and the situation itself has a beginning, middle, end. And paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 are meant to outline and explain and give details about that beginning, middle, end. So, paragraph 1 is the beginning of the report, but the beginning of the situation that you're reporting on actually happens in paragraph 2. And paragraph 5 is the end of the report, but in terms of what how the situation itself ended, that would be in paragraph 4. So this is the structure that I think works really well with students developing their reports and when they have to respond and so on. And during this week, what I really hope is that have students sort of look at situations and identify the beginning, middle, end. Where did it start? What happened during the middle of it? How did it end? Because that is what is really going to give them the details to fulfill the requirements for paragraphs 2, 3, and 4. And you also want them to recognize what's the difference between relevant and irrelevant information. What do I include? What do I leave out? And that is something that you will have to revisit more than once. And as students start, putting the pieces together and really understanding and getting into the details of report writing, you'd find that yes, you're going to have to repeat, which is why we're working with getting the structure introduced now so that they can continuously go back to it because of course repetition and practice is how they remember and really understand what to do. So we're getting that done and getting that really clear now. Of course, when I teach reports and in the textbook that I have, there are worksheets, and I have something to show you. um, I got the proof copy for this is the practice booklet to accompany the textbook. And in this practice booklet, there are worksheets that you can check for types of reports. Um, every activity and lesson in the text, there are 3 additional practice worksheets in here for each of those and some additional information, like I know, um, for example, there's some information. Where is it? Reported speech, all of that. Yep, in the lessons. And so I'm actually hopefully getting the journal proof this week so that the journal has, some information on grammar and punctuation, little extra details that would really help with the report writing. So I'm finally putting the whole report writing package together. So by next week, Tuesday, it is the plan that I would be telling you cost and everything because we'd be done with that. And for report writing, I really do recommend going through because, having a worksheet and, practice materials because the thing with reports is that students aren't really familiar all the time with that formal tone, and getting that formal tone is really what's important. So the sentence structure, the vocabulary, the way the information is presented, because we I had mentioned this before, but that concept of flow in writing really has to do not only with what information you include and how you write it in terms of vocabulary, but it also has to do with the order the information is presented. And while I think there's no really specified order, I have found that a certain order really does enhance the flow. So it's something that that I think you should consider. So definitely 5 paragraph structure. Your job this week is just to have students, you have your child memorize this so they know the order. Play games, do activities and different things. So just to help them understand what goes into each paragraph. We're not writing yet. We're just making sure that we understand what goes into each paragraph as well as the order of the information, the order of the paragraphing. All right. And once this is memorized, remember, as I said, there's no set number of paragraphs. I recommend 5. Even if a paragraph has like 2 sentences, it counts as a paragraph. So I recommend keeping to the 5 paragraphs so that students have that organization and structure. However, remember, as we started, there is no specified length of paragraph, no specified length of the report. The only guideline is more than 1 paragraph, and introduction, body, conclusion should be absolutely clear. All right. So that's it for this week on report writing. So our next topic on the agenda is narrative writing, which is writing stories. So let's get into this. So I want to pause to talk about plotting versus planning a little bit. Just a quick word. When I refer to stories, I use the word plotting instead of planning because I believe students should organize their ideas according to the plot. I'm going to tell you what that is in a minute and go through general understanding of plot. But of course, I've mentioned before that I do have a special 12-point plot development outline that I'm going to share with you briefly. Next week we'll go into that in a little bit more detail when we start talking more about the 6-part story structure. But for this week, I really want you to understand what plot is, the basic elements of plot, and why when students go to write a story, they really should be thinking how to plot their story and not simply planning. And I use plot for stories and plan for reports for 2 reasons. One, it helps students separate the two in their minds. And we know that some students have difficulty with um, they write reports as if they're stories with lots of expressions, and then they write stories very strict and formal without enough expressions. So, one of the key ways for me to help students distinguish what it is they're writing so that they can access the right information is to use different terminologies. So, planning for reports and plotting for stories. So, that's one reason. Another reason is that when you're planning a report, all you're doing is giving the details of what happened. So you just state what happened. In a story, you're meant to do more than simply state what happened. You're meant to describe it and show connections. So there's a really big emphasis on cause and effect with stories. And because of that, you're moving beyond planning. The whole idea of plotting is to show cause and effect between the elements and between what's going on in a story. All right. So, those are the 2 reasons I recommend when you're talking about reports. Use the term planning for organizing ideas. When you're talking about stories, use the term plotting to organize your ideas. All right. So, let's let's get into plotting stories. Now, what a plot really is, like I said, is kind of like the outline of the story, and that outline shows how the events are connected. And most people would be familiar with the um, plot mountain, some people call it, because, we talk about the different elements and how things work together. Then we look at things like exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So these are the five aspects of plot. Now, of course, my 12-point plot development breaks this down into a little bit more detail. And the reason for that is because each of these sections really is more involved than just one thing. Of course, it's a story, and we're talking about development and, giving more details and expressions and exploring ideas and so on. So you'd find that each of these sections would be a little more involved, especially these first two. So let me share just a little bit of information about each of these. And as we continue, like I said, we're going to get into many more discussions about this and much more detail. So this week for narratives, what you're really trying to do is to help your child understand that a story has sections just like a report. Stories have sections, and you want them to know what the different sections are. So we're working with these 5 sections for now, and then next week we would break it apart into more detail and expand on it. But you're starting with these are the 5 elements of plot, if you want to call them that. And certainly, if you do a Google search with elements of plot, you'd be able to find all the different details about this. You'd get the list, you'd get more detailed diagrams. But in all my searching and working with authors and students, I haven't really found anything that goes into detail to really help students see and understand the connection between the different sections, which is why I came up with that 12-point plot development. But I get ahead of myself. Let's deal with this first. And like I said, we're going week by week. I'll give you more details as time progresses. So, what is the exposition? The exposition is pretty much the introduction to the story. And in that introduction, what you're looking at is you're introducing the character, you're introducing the setting, and we're getting an idea of, what characters are about, what are their goals, what are they aiming for, what do they want. So we're kind of like setting the context. So I call it context because I think it helps really, kind of separate the ideas a little bit, because part of that exposition is also something called the hook, which is that very first line that gets the reader's attention. That's part of exposition because you want your story to kind of start in an interesting way, have some fun with it, right? So we're looking at hook plus context, really giving that exposition. So we want to know where are the characters? Are they at home, in their house? Are they at school? Are they at the beach? Where are they? And you would want to introduce your setting, with some excitement and some details. But there's a session on setting development, and we'll get there. So for now, we really just want them to know, the students and your child, whoever you're working with, you want them to know stories have sections, and these are 5 of the major groupings, and this is what is involved in each. So exposition, start the story. Who are the characters involved in the story? Tell us about them. What do they want? Why are they where they are? And where are they? What's happening? So, sometimes we talk about giving background details and that kind of thing. All of that happens in the exposition. Now, the next part of the story has to do with the rising action. Now, the essay style narrative absolutely must have conflict. The whole point of Rising Action is how characters respond to conflict and how conflict escalates and gets worse and tensions rise and there's a lot of suspense and that is what happens at the Rising Action. So a student who deals with only one mild situation isn't really going to be able to establish effective rising action. There's a process for rising action, and this is where, like I said, that 12-point plot development comes in, because what I do is to show students how to create that rising action in those sections and really go into detail about it. We do lots of practice and experiments and so on. One of my favorite experiments with this is well, I do when I teach plot, I do two experiments. I do one called the popcorn experiment and one called the elephant toothpaste experiment. Now, it's the students really enjoy the activity, but more than that, what they get is a very tangible activity that can help them engage in that multisensory learning, and therefore they would be more likely to remember all the things that are happening. All right. So that is where now I know if you're new to these lives and you're new to me, um, I'm very, very much into multisensory learning, which is helping students engage with writing and whatever subject you're working on actually, but engage with it through multiple senses. And when students participate in a multisensory learning lesson, what happens is that we want to engage more than one sense at a time. So we're not really looking at, this time we're doing this and next time we're doing that. We really want multiple senses. So those experiments help students, see and hear and smell and touch and really interact um, as much as possible with the material when it comes to the writing. And I've found that it really gets students excited. And believe me, when you have a student who is interested in writing, that is like half your battle right there, because then you can really get into discussions and details. And unfortunately, way too many students are traumatized by writing and writing activities. So, part of my agenda is to make writing and learning about writing as much fun as possible so that students will want to do it and want to engage in it and really give more of their creativity to the situation. So, rising action, there are different parts of it. We absolutely must have conflict, and conflict is something that we will be discussing. If you haven't already downloaded your schedule, go and get it scheduled, because I do plot out, session by session what we'll be talking about, so you know ahead of time and how to prepare. All right, so that is rising action. Then we have the climax. Now, climax is a low point for me because I feel like it's just so totally misunderstood. Um, Many students tell me that, climax is the most exciting part of the story. Yes, it should be, but not for the reasons that many of them think. Now, most times students will tell me, okay, climax is the most exciting part of the story. And I said, okay, what does that mean? They tell me, well, that's when you introduce the biggest conflict. No, that is not when you introduce the biggest conflict. Climax is actually when the main character solves the biggest conflict, right? Not when it's introduced. But because it's such an issue, I've dedicated an entire session on intervention and climax so that you would really get that clear. I just had to say that because I really want students to understand what that conflict is. They have to be able to recognize what the climax is and how conflict interacts with it so that they can get the order of the story and the plot done effectively. So that's kind of what you're working on this week, making sure your child or your students can tell you what is the climax, what is exposition, gives you the details of them. You don't have to be able to write it now. We just want to be able to recognize it. So, bring stories, have them act things out. I do lots of charades and, interaction in my class, even though all classes are online, um, because you want them to get involved and really kind of experience how the plot works, right? So, again, just a quick note, climax is the most exciting part of the story, yes, but it's the most exciting part because this is how we see the details of how the hero wins. That's pretty much what happens. And then falling action. So, stuff happened, we faced the fears and we faced the monster and we won. How do we feel about that? What is happening after the winning takes place? That first part of explaining that's called the falling action. Now, when you think about it, falling action is kind of like a reaction to climax, and that's how I teach it because I think it's like it works in terms of getting students to really wrap their mind around the plot. Falling action, things are settling down, we're going back to normal, right? And then we have the resolution. The resolution has to do with we're back to as normal as possible. I call it the new normal because, I mean, after all the drama happened for the story, we're not just going to go back to how things were. Things have changed. And that aspect of what has changed, how it has changed, that is really what the resolution is. So your resolution is like what are the characters going to do now after they've won, they've settled, they've, recovered from their victory. What's next? That's part of resolution. Also, part of resolution is, how characters, um, respond to the whole thing in terms of, what have they learned. A really important part of an SEA narrative is that lesson learned because it sort of puts the experiences that were described into context and it shows the impact of the entire experience on the main character. So some people call it the moral of the story, some people call it I call it lesson learned. It's called the resolution, what's next. I also call it the new normal. So, things have changed. How have they changed? What am I going to do differently and why? That's pretty much what happens in that the the resolution aspect of the story. So, all right. So we have the five parts of the plot and we understand. I'm going to go through each of these in some more detail so that you are able to understand and share the information effectively with your child or your students. And then, only then, after we've done all of this and dealt with character development, also um, dealt with the setting and all of these things come together, then and only then will we actually start writing full stories. So we have a process that we're going through and we're taking it step by step because one of my pet peeves is that students are asked to produce before they're given enough material to produce with. So we really want to make sure that they understand this foundation and all of these details. All right. So, all right, I think we're pretty much at the end of the presentation today. Thank you so much for those of you who were able to take in live. If you didn't get the whole thing, that's fine. Recordings are all available from episode 1 to 4. This is episode 4. You can find recordings in SEA, the Peacefield Approach. If you're a member there, just check the videos, go to media and then videos, and it would be there. If you are looking at it on YouTube, of course, the videos will be archived on YouTube. On my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth, in the video section of the page, you would get the videos there. If you're not on social media, you're not on Facebook, and you happen to be looking at this on the YouTube, if you want to find all the videos together, you can actually now go to my website, which is wordcoach.com. That's WERDCOACH.com. And you'd see a tab there labeled Journey to SEA 2024. All the videos are going to be archived there, so you get all in one neat place. And the access to the schedules, if you haven't already downloaded the schedule, you can get a copy of the schedules there. I do two separate schedules, one for reports, one for narratives, because even though I'm giving you basic information on both of them in these lives, I actually teach them separately, again, to make sure that students don't confuse the two. All right. So I recommend, touching on these on separate days. So maybe Tuesdays for reports, Thursdays for narratives, Mondays for reports, Wednesdays for narratives, however you want to work it out. And allocate like about maybe 30 minutes a session for discussions. And when we get into the writing and so on, you might want to up that a little bit to an hour so that you can do, full practice because they're practicing to write these things within 50 minutes. Okay, so that is it. Remember, leave your comments, message me if you have questions about anything that was shared. If you're looking for additional resources and materials, let me know. I am open to meeting with groups, to sharing information, and I'm working on having another um, training session. Last year, I did a training session where I gave those who attended copies of the worksheets that I use, copies of everything that I use, and I went through step by step with them how I actually teach these things so that it's engaging. If that is something that you're interested in, message me and I will put your name on a short list because I keep my classes small, whether I'm dealing with adults or with students. I keep my classes very small so that I can give people the information and the details as necessary. All right, but you can look out for that as well if you're interested in finding out more about how to teach the report writing and how to teach narrative writing in exciting ways. All right, so thank you so much for joining. If you're looking at the replay, I appreciate that very much. Let me know, give me a thumbs up, give me a like. Facebook page, you can subscribe to the YouTube page so that you can get notifications and all those things. And thank you for joining us on Road to SEA 2024.